Hello, everyone. Quick,
Hello.
wait.
Hey,
Well, thank you for coming to today's session around AI prompt engineering for automation developers. So my name is Max Cassidy. I'm a senior program manager here at Automation Anywhere. Here, I'll pass it over.
My name is Yemi Falokun. I'm from Google Cloud, and I work with Automation Anywhere on some of the generative AI capabilities that they're bringing into their platform. Pleased to meet you all.
Now, in today's session, we are going to be going over the fundamentals of prompt engineering when it comes to integrating this within Automation Anywhere. But before we jump in, I just want you all to have a quick look at our safe harbor. If you can all take a look through this. This is basically just to make sure that any purchases made with Automation Anywhere are made by your decision and that we haven't pushed you in order to be able to make these decisions moving forward. I'll leave that up there just for a few more seconds in order to be able to go through that and read that before we move on to the main context. Now, Automation Anywhere is bridging the gap between automation and generative AI by offering the functionality to be able to integrate with generative AI and large language models straight from the platform itself to be able to create cost-effective automations, streamlining processes, and start tackling advanced use cases that before were not possible or required massive amount of human intervention. Now, the agenda for today's session. We will begin by taking a look at how large language models can advance and enhance your automations. We're going to take a look at the benefits of generative AI tools and what it is that they offer, as well as how these generative AI tools can enhance customer interactions while providing support and even tailoring error handling for very efficient ways of managing your automations within production. So enhancing automations with large language models. Now, in this era of automation and innovation, large language models are an amazing technology that we can all get on board with. Automation Anywhere is bridging the gap between enhancing automations using generative AI. Now, when it comes down to these large language models, these are sophisticated AI tools that are trained on vast amounts of data. They allow for human interaction to be able to take place, talking, asking questions, being able to generate responses, and being able to obtain a response from this regarding of the prompt that you are going to be going in with. Now, we're going to go through some use cases that's going to bridge this gap later on down the line. But when it comes to utilizing large language models with automation, they can assist with aspects like your document structuring. If you are now working with unstructured data that's captured from documents, before it would require a massive amount of human interaction in order to be able to work with this unstructured data. Now, by leveraging large language models, we can actually pass the data through these large language models to receive the fields that we need. We can do query analysis to be able to make sure that if we, let's say, we are working with responses or we are working with feedback received by certain products that we've got, we are able to go through this, provide sentiment analysis within seconds around the product or the review that we're working with, and specific responses. If you're working within customer care and you have responses or questions that are coming in from your customers, by leveraging automation and large language models, you are able to provide specific and tailored answers unique to the customer that is asking the question based off historic data that you're going to be working with. Now, in order to be able to achieve the strongest responses from your large language models, it's all about how you can tailor your response and your prompt. To be able to make sure that you are contextually receiving all of the information correctly, it's vital that your prompt is tailored correctly, and we're going to go through this later on in this presentation. But by integrating this with Automation Anywhere, you can receive direct responses that are very contextually correct around what it is that you are asking the large language model. Okay, so when we start looking at the anatomy of a prompt, Yemi, over to you for this one.
Yeah, sure. So when you look at the anatomy of a prompt, what are you doing? You're really just asking the language model to provide a response. And when you do that, you're trying to give it a context, to say, I want you to be, for example, if some of you have been into the bot games challenge that we have going on, there's a product review option where you get to review credit cards. You can say, you are a credit card reviewer and I want you to review the following comment as a context. Then you can say, from a review point of view, I want you to just review the comments and give me whether it's a positive comment, whether it's a negative comment, or whether it's a neutral comment, if that's one of the options that you want, right? Then you can then also give it examples if you want to do that as well. So you can give it maybe 2 or 3, because you have 3 options: positive, neutral, and negative. You can give it 3 examples, and then say this one is a positive, this one's a negative, this one's a neutral as part of that as well. Then maybe one of the things you want to do is, as part of your automation, you actually want it to provide a certain format. So folks are familiar with JSON, for example, because you want to use it further downstream to do some post-processing. So you might say, yes, I want positive, neutral, and negative, but I actually want you to give me a JSON with a status code with it, so that then you can use it in following processing. So those are really the key pieces. So it's the context, it's the example, it's the format, and there's also the instructions. And one of the key things to realize here is that there are multiple things you can do with a language model, but you always want to simplify your prompt. The simpler, the better. And if that means having to break your prompts down into multiple steps, even that, because when I'm sure when you guys are building automation bots, you always simplify your bots to do simple things and put them all together. Same thing with a language model. You want to do simple prompts, even if you do multiple prompts. So that's the essence of a good prompt design.
And here we have the anatomy of a prompt, which is going over exactly what you was just saying there. So here is a perfect example of how we would want to structure a prompt when working with automation anywhere, to pass it through in order to be able to receive the response that we want. To begin with, we have the context and instruction, and this builds the scene. This is acting as somewhat like a story, really making sure that the large language model is understanding the context of what it is that we are asking in this circumstance. We can see here that we're asking it to clearly outline each activity's duration and intensity, which these are 2 pieces of the instruction that we're asking for. We're tailoring the prompt exactly what it is that we're wanting to create, which is a concise routine for a morning workout that does include stretching. When we start looking at the format modifier, this is a sample routine. This means that the prompt is going to use this as an example of the format of how we want to receive that output back. As you can see here, we've given it an example, and from the example within the format modifier itself, that means that the response we're going to get from that is going to match this area here. When we go down and we actually have a look at the example, this is an example. Rather than being an example of how we want the data to come back to us, this is an example of what it is that we're wanting to receive. So as you can see, we want a well-rounded routine that ensures that you start your day right. So this is showing that we need to make sure that the routine that we get back is not just focused on one specific key area, but is to be well-rounded. Now, whenever it comes to a case of being able to tailor your prompt, it's always vital that you test multiple outputs. Now, with generative AI, it's not always the case, depending on your prompt, that your response that you retrieve back will be the same each time. I've seen circumstances with generative AI where you're going through it and you can get a consistent response 8 times, but without including the context and instruction, your format modifiers and your examples, you're still leaving that bridge in order to be able to allow that large language model to interpret a different response and maybe output something that actually isn't contextually correct to what you are after. So whenever you are going into your writing of a prompt, you always want to make sure that these key aspects are carried out and included. And even if it means breaking it down like this, just like Yemi said, you can build your prompt in sections, asking for the feedback in different areas, and even when it comes to automation, these responses can be captured in variables. So if you're breaking this response here down into 3 separate areas, them 3 areas can easily be stored into 3 separate variables and then strung together at the end to get your perfect response. Likewise, if you are asking your prompt, let's say you have 10 separate questions that you want to ask, you do not want to overflow the large language model with these questions. So always take a step back with your prompts. Make sure you're asking, are you asking the correct context and instruction? Are you including that format modifier, and are you giving an example? Also taking a note, have I got multiple questions here that can be broken down, or can it all go through correctly? Testing is key when it comes to this, to be able to make sure that the response that you get back is correct, and especially if you're integrating this within your automation solutions. Now, your tokenization. So the way that these large language models work is via tokenization to be able to monitor each word, sentence, or punctuation, and each one classes as a token. Now, when it comes to leveraging generative AI and large language models, this is an area where you want to make sure you are keeping on top of, because this is also what can save you cost down the line. Now, the more questions that you're asking your prompt, and the more feedback and the more data that you're receiving from this means that the more tokens that this is going to use. Each token has a value of cost depending on the usage that you're going to be working with it. As you can see on the example at the left, here, each word is assigned a single token. What is one token? Time is another token. It is another token, and so on. And this is what allows the generative AI and the prompt solution in order to be able to generate the response that is going to be cost-effective to your solution. So again, when it comes to being able to manage your prompts and work within generative AI, the tokenization aspect is key to keeping that cost down and streamlining the operation on a whole. There is a tokenizer tool that is also embedded within ChatGPT. This will allow you, in order to be able to input your prompts before integrating them with Automation Anywhere, and receive the response back in terms of how many tokens are being used and how many characters are being used. Now, why is this important? This is important because if you are integrating automation with generative AI, you want to keep the cost as low as possible. That means that your prompts want to be as low tokens as possible and limit the responses that you're retrieving back. If you are extracting specific pieces of data from a document, all you want as a response are the pieces of data that you are after. You don't need filler words to say, I have extracted this data for you, because all of that is additional tokens that you don't need. And this can all be stripped out by your effective prompt writing techniques. Again, whenever you're going to be integrating automation with large language models, utilizing a tool like this is going to make sure that you have a cost-effective solution. Perfect. Now, the temperature. The temperature is what allows you to be able to make your prompt either give you a direct response back or get creative. By tailoring the temperature, if we have our temperature set to 0.2, you are going to have a direct response back. It is not going to open it up for creativity in the response itself. So an example of this, if I have my temperature at 0.2 and I say, what is the current time where I'm at? It's going to give me the current time for the location of where it is that I'm positioned. However, if I open up the creativity here and change my temperature to, let's say, 0.8 or 1, now the response that I get may also include other time zones. Your time zone is here, which is 1 hour behind X place, 2 hours behind Y place, and it allows for that elaboration on the data that you're receiving. Again, this can be great if you're creating them specific responses to, let's say, customer reviews. If somebody leaves a review for a product that you're wanting to sell and you're wanting it to make sure that the response that you give, leveraging a large language model and Automation Anywhere, is creative, friendly, engaging. By adding them keywords and increasing the temperature, you're giving your large language model flexibility in the response that it can generate back to you, which means that it's not going to seem like a robot is actually crafting this response and giving it back to the customer, but it can actually start adding some human touches. And even if you start threading it through with previous examples of chat logs that's already been received from the customer through to the client itself, it will be able to start matching the language patterns while still leaving that little bit of leverage to get creative with the responses and generate that conversation in place. One thing to remember with regards to this, though, is with that higher temperature, as it says at the bottom, you are less likely to be able to predict that response. So if you are after a very direct response without leveraging too many tokens, you want to keep that temperature at a low point. Do you want to take this?
Yep, there you go. So I think some of this stuff we've already covered, but it's just giving you some guidelines on when you are structuring a prompt. It's really being concise and precise. It's just being, I want you to do this one thing and do it. If I need to do multiple things, break it up into multiple prompts, and then you can have a chain of prompts. And obviously that allows you to also control some of the parameters that Max just talked about around the tokens that come back or the number of characters. And also you can then apply different temperatures as well to the different prompts, depending on how predictive you want it to be versus just being a more general, for lack of a better word, as well. Use action verbs. Say, develop, create. You are an AI assistant doing credit card review. Just kind of place the LLM into the world you want it to be, kind of like the actor you want it to be as part of your prompt design as well. And then for constraints, I talked about the board game. So we gave it 3 constraints. We just want you to return positive, neutral, and negative. So give it constraints if you know you actually want it to return certain things. Give it a constraint. If you know you want it to return a certain format, give it the format output. You may even have to go as far as giving it an example of the output that you want it to produce as well, so the LLM understands the actual final output you're looking for when you send the prompt in. Okay. Cool.
Now, when we look at the integration between Automation Anywhere and the generative AI tool that it is that you want to utilize, we are very adaptable. We're supporting ChatGPT. We're supporting Azure GPT. We have Google Vertex AI, and there is Amazon Bedrock there as well. Now, remember, whenever you're using any of these platforms, to the right-hand side, you will see these 3 key areas: intelligence, efficiency, and innovation. Now, these large language models are extremely intelligent, and that's why it's vital in order to be able to craft your prompt to receive only the data that you want to receive. Remember, you want to make sure that the response is relevant to what it is that you're asking. So be very intelligent when it comes to being able to craft that response and provide it all of the data needed in order to be able to generate the output that you are requiring. The efficiency around large language models when streamlining this within current use cases for automation. We're going to cover a few aspects of this shortly down the line with a few examples that we've got. But when it starts to come and you're merging automation with these large language models, you can really start to streamline processes that before would have taken a large amount of time. A great example for where this would actually come into play would be around that customer service or even a marketing campaign. If you are launching a new marketing campaign, you've gone through the prerequisites of knowing exactly, okay, this is the context that I want to include within my marketing campaign. These are the graphics around this idea of what it is that I'm wanting to deliver. Large language models can be leveraged in order to be able to generate a lot of the marketing content for you in a very quick amount of time. When passed over to a human, this would then go to human review and human validation in order to be able to check that response and then start utilizing it. The purpose of the large language models for areas like this isn't to streamline that entire process, it's to be able to make a chunk of it a lot quicker and more efficient to be able to streamline your workflow and make your lives easier. I always picture these large language models as a personal assistant. Imagine having a personal assistant that is proficient within language. If you ask them in order to be able to create a document that outlines a summary of X amount of data within your records, large language models can do that for you within seconds. If you are utilizing different types of code, JavaScript, Python, and you go through code reviews in order to be able to check that it follows best practice techniques, large language models can help assist with that. By passing forward the code, they're enabled to perform a code analysis. Likewise, if you need a complex segment of code for something that you are currently building, by giving the prompt the data in order to be able to tell it exactly what it is that you're wanting to achieve, what language you're wanting to write that code in, large language models can generate that code for you, allowing you to then work on that and tailor it, knowing that it's going to follow best practice techniques, especially if you did provide a format modifier of how you are currently coding your in-house technology. And again, innovation. With large language models, you want to think outside of the box, and you want to make sure that you're crafting that perfect prompt in order to be able to receive the information that you need. But likewise, in certain circumstances, you may not want to limit what it is that you're receiving with regards to the output from that prompt. So always think and always test whenever it comes around to actually receiving that output and the prompt that you put in. So this is one of the use cases that we've got in play. So GP services at the moment, especially in the United States, when you go and you tell your GP that something's wrong, you've got a cough, you've got a flu, your symptoms actually all go down to a code. So after you've been, that GP will have to go through, and they're going to have to turn the notes that they've generated from your interview into specific pieces of code and load that through into specific documents like you see here, CPT, ICD-10, and HCPCS, in order to be able to assign it for insurance purposes and to make sure that that money is generated. Now, as a GP, they are trained in this. They have to go through extensive training in order to be able to understand and interpret these codes, whereas this data is available within large language models. So what we now see is GPs, rather than having to spend hours after seeing each patient, creating the documents, adding the codes to the forms, and being able to make sure that everything is correct for insurance purposes, we can leverage large language models in order to be able to turn the notes into a structured format with all of the codes noted on there, which means now the GP is only validating and going over a specific document rather than having to create it all from scratch after each patient. As you can imagine, with a fair few patients, this is going to be a very time-consuming job. By leveraging generative AI, this can all be done at the end of the day and streamline the process, allowing the GP to potentially see more patients that single day. Now, as I said, we can really enhance automation with these large language models. If we wanted to previously start taking automations to the next step by adopting complementary technology, integrating with Python code, using JavaScript or VB script or leveraging Microsoft.NET, you would have to have a complex software developer or some sort of developer in place in order to be able to generate this. Now you don't. Now we can leverage large language models, again, like I said, to be able to generate this code in order to be able to use within your automations. You can use large language models in order to make sure that if you have 5 or so developers all developing code, these can make sure that all of them code follow best practice techniques, and they can actually tell the developer exactly what part of the code either needs to be looked at and the issue itself. So any developers in here that are used to seeing them syntax errors that are popping up, by leveraging large language models and being able to put the code into these large language models, stating the error message that we're receiving, these large language models will be able to tell us the issue at hand and even sometimes fix that problem for us. Again, making troubleshooting a lot more efficient. Now, when it comes to testing prompts for your automation consumption, this part is key. Now, when you're passing your prompts through from automation into your large language model, you're going to be utilizing APIs. Now, API calls when leveraging this technology is different to if you were going to be doing it manually. So it's vital that, for example, what we see here is from ChatGPT. And this part is called the playground. And what this will allow you to do is actually input your prompt exactly how you would be inputting it within automation. The response that is then given here is an example response of exactly what you would receive by passing it through an API. Now again, if you are leveraging your large language models and using automation, you want to make sure that all of your prompts are tested before being put into production using the API tester that is all included. This makes sure that your prompts are concise, straight to the point, and you are receiving the data that you want to receive every single time. Now, human-in-the-loop validation. By leveraging large language models and automation and working alongside a human, we can really start to streamline specific actions in play. So let's take, for instance, I won't go into the financial sector because we've got another example of that coming up, but let's take, for instance, here a customer service representation. So at the moment, what that customer service rep is doing is they'll be receiving calls from the customer, let's say managing specific complaints. These complaints need to be managed within multiple systems that's coming into play, and the complaints are all around a specific product. Now, most of the time, these complaints will come into either one centralized mailbox, and they'll spend days going through each and every single one of them. What we can start leveraging here is actually we can use large language models to be able to capture the complaint and generate that response. The human in the loop will then, rather than having to respond and contextually write a response back to that customer that's complaining, now they're given a response. They can tailor it, they can make it more sincere, they can make it more direct if they want to. They can limit this just by utilizing a few clicks of a button. Now, when we start leveraging large language models with complementary technologies, let's say document automation or Copilot, then we get that more control. We can integrate Copilot into various technologies and make sure that the large language models that's running behind Copilot are giving the responses back to the human that is working on that project. Now, when we start looking into the realms of enhancing customer interactions and even how these large language models can support these people, it's a case of efficiently speeding up the process of what the human is currently doing at that point in time. You can see how we can intelligently classify communications from information that's coming in. So let's take, for instance, a live communication center. So rather than utilizing a chatbot, you have that live chat feature that's open on a daily basis. When somebody asks a question within that chat feature and you have a person on the other end of that wants to give that human response, the human would have to find the answer to the question that that person is asking. Now, by leveraging Copilot and large language models, what we can now do is actually have the automation pick up the question. That question can then be answered efficiently by the large language model, and then they're passed back to the human itself. The human can then add a personal touch before responding and sending the response straight back to the person that's going to be asking that question. We can reduce processing times by making sure that the support or the question that's in hand is linked through with large language models and generate your response within automation. Now, a great area of this is around the financial sector again. So handling customer complaints from various sources can be a very, very tedious job. And trying to get this into play, compliance with FINRA Rule 4530, you need to make sure that customer complaints are logged within 15 days before the end of quarter. Depending on how many complaints that you've got in play, that could be a very time-consuming job and also a pricey job if you're actually needing to use humans in order to be able to focus and process these responses and complaints. Now, by leveraging, again, automation and large language models, automation can capture the complaints. They can log them and make sure all of them are stored, and large language models that can be leveraged for the actual response that they're going to be receiving and making sure that the complaint itself is contextually correct and it's actually accurate to what is being asked or complained about in that circumstance. So when it comes to collaborating with generative AI, large language models, and automation anywhere, as I said, automation anywhere is bridging that gap by providing you integrated packages within the platform to be able to directly link with these large language models. So make the most of the automation anywhere generative AI skills by following our booster, which is available on the Pathfinder Academy. And this will be able to take you through the fundamentals of integrating your large language models and generative AI with automation anywhere. Again, join the Generative AI Pathfinder community group. And this will allow you to be able to connect with others within a forum and ask questions around your generative AI solutions, as you'll find that a lot of other customers and peers are going to be utilizing this for many, many different operations. And finally, the collaboration is key. This is what's going to present opportunities, and it's going to allow you for efficiency to be able to grow your program even further. Now, the Pathfinder group. Make sure you all experience Pathfinder today. We start off by taking the Pathfinder assessment. This assessment will be able to highlight key areas within your automation program that you can focus on in order to be able to scale. Once these areas have been identified, we can start exploring the overall missions in order to be able to utilize and scale your automation program. Now, the Pathfinder Academy will allow you to offer learning resources that's going to be able to advance your current developers and your automation program and show you how you can correctly integrate generative AI and large language models with automation. And again, that Pathfinder community. This is an overall forum and a community which allows everybody to be able to speak and ask questions to one another and work out how they can really start leveraging automation anywhere and generative AI in a way that we never saw was possible. Now, thank you all for your time today when it comes to going over generative AI, large language models, and integrating that within Automation Anywhere. Of course, I'd definitely recommend taking a look at the Automation Anywhere platform, especially under the generative AI packages. And any information that you need on this can be found within our Pathfinder community, where we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.